Have you ever heard of a queen so powerful, so captivating, that her face has become one of the most recognizable images in the world, yet her story ends in complete silence? That queen was Nefertiti. Nefertiti lived over 3,000 years ago, in the 14th century BCE, and she wasn't just any royal consort. She was the great royal wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten, a man who turned Egypt upside down with one of the most radical religious revolutions in history. Together, they defied centuries of tradition. Instead of worshipping dozens of gods, Akhenaten and Nefertiti declared that Egypt would honor only one, the Aten, the sun disk. And standing right beside the pharaoh, not behind him, was Nefertiti. She wasn't just a background figure in history. In carvings and temple walls, you see her almost as often as you see She's shown offering sacrifices, wearing the royal crown, even smiting Egypt's enemies, acts normally reserved only for kings. And then of course there's her image that the whole world knows. The famous painted limestone bust discovered in Amarna in 1912, now in Berlin. That face, perfectly symmetrical, serene, confident, has turned Nefertiti into a timeless symbol of beauty and power. But here's the twist. As prominent as she was, as celebrated as she became, Nefertiti suddenly vanishes. After a certain point in Akhenaten's reign, her name is erased from the record. No more inscriptions, no more mentions, nothing. It's as if history itself conspired to make her disappear. And that's where the mystery begins. Did she die, suddenly, perhaps from illness? Was she pushed aside in a brutal palace struggle? Or here's the most fascinating theory: did she take on a new identity and secretly rule Egypt as pharaoh in her own right? The truth is, nobody knows for certain. But what we do know is this: the disappearance of Nefertiti is one of the greatest unsolved puzzles of the ancient world. And it raises a bigger question: how does someone so visible, so central to one of Egypt's most dramatic chapters, simply vanish without a trace? When we think of ancient queens, we often imagine women who lived in the shadows of their kings, silent and invisible in the grand halls of power. But Nefertiti was different. From the very moment she entered history, she broke that mold. She became the great royal wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten around 1353 BC. Now, titles in ancient Egypt weren't just ceremonial, they carried deep political meaning. To be the great royal wife was to be the pharaoh's most trusted partner, the one who shared not just his throne but also his vision, and Akhenaten's vision. It was nothing short of revolutionary. You see, for centuries, Egypt had been a land of many gods, hundreds of them, each with their own temples, priests, and traditions. But Akhenaten wanted to change everything. He declared that Egypt would no longer worship the traditional pantheon, but instead focus on one god alone, Aton, the sun disk. Imagine the audacity of that move. In a world built on rituals to Amen, Osiris, and Ra, Akhenaten dared to sweep them aside. It wasn't just a religious shift, it was a political earthquake. And right at the center of this bold experiment stood Nefertiti. She wasn't a silent observer, dragged along by her husband's ambition. No, every piece of evidence we have shows she was just as active, just as determined, and maybe even more charismatic than the pharaoh himself. Look at the art from that period, the Amarna style, in reliefs carved into stone, in temple walls, and even in small household shrines. Nefertiti appears again and again, almost always beside Akhenaten, not behind him, not in the background, but equal, shoulder to shoulder. She's shown wearing the royal crown, sometimes even the blue war crown usually reserved for kings. She's offering sacrifices to Aten, leading ceremonies, and raising her hands in prayer. And here's something remarkable. She is often depicted with her daughters, playing with them in tender, almost human scenes. That may not sound unusual to us today, but in ancient Egyptian art where pharaohs were often shown as distant, godlike beings, it was groundbreaking. These images weren't just political. They gave Nefertiti a sense of warmth and relatability that few rulers in history ever displayed. Think about that for a moment. What does it mean when a queen is portrayed not only as a mother but also as a leader, as someone who could perform rituals that, until then, only a pharaoh could perform? To me, it suggests that Nefertiti wasn't just a queen in the traditional sense. She was a partner in power, a architect of this radical new Egypt. Some scholars even argue that without Nefertiti, Akhenaten's revolution might never have taken hold. He had the authority of the throne, yes, but she had something just as powerful: presence, charisma, and the ability to embody the new faith in a way that captured people's imagination. Her very name, Nefertiti, means the beautiful one has come, and in a society where beauty was often linked with divine favor, her image gave weight to this strange new religion centered on the blazing light of the sun. But here's the deeper question we need to ask: was Nefertiti simply supporting her husband's dream, or was she shaping it herself? After all, history shows us that revolutions rarely succeed because of one person alone. They need a team, a partnership, a balance of strengths. Perhaps Akhenaten was the visionary, but Nefertiti was the force that made people believe it could work. This duality of being both queen and something more makes her rise even more fascinating. She wasn't content to live behind palace walls. She stepped out into the world stage of Egypt's greatest experiment. claiming a role in art, religion, and politics that no queen before her had ever dared to take. And that's why, when we look at the images left behind, it's almost impossible to separate Akhenaten from Nefertiti. They are two halves of the same. And then, almost as suddenly as she appeared, Nefertiti was gone. For years her image had been everywhere on temple walls, in sculptures carved into the very fabric of Egypt's identity during the Amarna period. But after the 12th year of Akhenaten's reign, something eerie happens. Her name vanishes from the record. No more inscriptions, no more depictions. It's as if someone reached into history itself and erased her. Imagine flipping through a family photo album where page after page is filled with one person and then suddenly, they're just missing. That's what it feels like when historians study the end of Nefertiti's story. In fact, in some places, her name was literally chiseled out and replaced with other royal names. It wasn't just absence, it was deliberate erasure. But why? There are a few possible explanations, and each one is as fascinating as it is mysterious. Theory 1. Early death. The simplest answer is often the most tempting. Maybe Nefertiti simply died. Around that time, Egypt was suffering from outbreaks of plague that may have claimed countless lives. If Nefertiti fell victim, her sudden disappearance from the historical record could be explained. But here's the thing. This was Nefertiti. She wasn't just any queen. She was central to the most dramatic religious and cultural revolution in Egyptian history. If she had died, wouldn't there have been ceremonies, inscriptions, monuments built in her honor? The silence feels too absolute. Theory 2. Fall from favor. Another possibility is far darker. What if Nefertiti didn't die but was pushed aside? Royal courts were brutal places, filled with rivalries, plots, and power struggles. Maybe another queen or royal woman replaced her in Akhenaten's favor. Some even speculate that her own daughters could have been elevated in her place. If that were true, then erasing her name from the record wasn't just neglect, it was political strategy. By removing her, Akhenaten's court could rewrite the story, making it appear as though she had never held such influence. But again, this theory raises questions. Why erase her so thoroughly? Why destroy the legacy of someone who had once stood as co-architect of a new religion? Theory 3. Transformation into Pharaoh. This is where the mystery becomes almost cinematic. Some scholars believe Nefertiti didn't vanish at all. Instead, she may have transformed into Pharaoh Nefertiti, ruling under a new name after Akhenaten's death. Think about how bold that would be. A queen stepping into the ultimate seat of power, not as a regent or placeholder, but as pharaoh, in her own right. We know Egypt had a few female pharaohs in its long history. Hatshepsut, centuries before, proved it could be done. Could Nefertiti have followed the same path? Some inscriptions hint at a mysterious corolla late in Akhenaten's reign. Was that Nefertiti in disguise? Was her disappearance not a fall, but a rise into an even more powerful role? Theory 4. The Tutankhamun connection. And then there's the most tantalizing theory of all, the link between Nefertiti and the boy king, Tutankhamun. Some historians suggest that Nefertiti may have been his stepmother, guiding him as he took the throne at a very young age. Others argue she may even have been his Karula, shaping his early reign. If that's true, then her influence extended far beyond Akhenaten's death, right into the next generation of Egypt's rulers. And here's where things get even more intriguing. In Tutankhamun's tomb, discovered in 1922, scholars have long debated whether there might be hidden chambers, perhaps even the lost burial place of Nefertiti herself. Radar scans in recent years have fueled speculation, though nothing conclusive has been found. Imagine what a discovery like that would mean. Not only solving the mystery of her disappearance, but rewriting everything we thought we knew about Egypt's most famous royal family. The bigger question: so what really happened to Nefertiti? Did she die quietly, struck down by plague? Was she erased in a storm of palace politics? Did she seize power herself, ruling as a pharaoh in secret? Or does her story continue in the life and reign of Tutankhamun? The truth is, we don't know. And maybe that's what makes her story so compelling. It's not just the beauty of her famous bust, or the power she held beside Akhenaten. It's the silence, the gaps, the deliberate erasures that leave us with more questions than answers. What's undeniable is this: Nefertiti's disappearance is one of history's greatest mysteries. And sometimes, the mysteries are what keep a story alive. Because maybe the real lesson of Nefertiti isn't just about how she lived, but about how she vanished, and how, even in absence, she continues to capture the imagination of the world thousands of years later. When it comes to Nefertiti, one of the biggest frustrations for historians and archaeologists is this: for someone so famous, so powerful, so loved in her time, she left behind almost no trace of her end. But the physical clues we do have, and the theories they've inspired, make her story even more intriguing. Let's start with the most iconic image of Nefertiti, the artifact that turned her into a global symbol of beauty. In 1912, German archaeologist Ludwig Burchardt was excavating in Amarna, the city Akhenaten built for his new religion. And there, buried under the desert sand, his team uncovered a painted limestone bust of the queen. You've probably seen it: long neck, the tall blue crown, the perfectly symmetrical face. It's not just a piece of art, it's a portrait that feels alive, even after more than 3,000 years. Today, it sits in Berlin's News Museum, and millions of visitors flock to see it every year. But here's the thing, as stunning as it is, that bust gives us no answers about her fate. It tells us what she looked like but not what happened to her. In fact, it almost feels like a cruel twist of history. The most beautiful face of the ancient world survives, but her story does in single quotes t. Now, let's move to the Valley of the Kings, where the real mystery begins. For years, archaeologists have speculated that Nefertiti's tomb might still be hidden somewhere beneath the sands. And some believe that it may even lie inside the tomb of her famous stepson Tutankhamun. When Howard Carter opened Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, it was the discovery of the century. Yet even today, Egyptologists continue to puzzle over its layout. Some scholars argue that the tomb feels unfinished, as if it wasn't originally meant for Tutankhamun at all. Instead, they suggest it may have once been designed for someone far more important, possibly Nefertiti herself. Fast forward to the 21st century. Between 2015 and 2018, advanced radar scans were conducted on Tutankhamun's tomb. The results were electrifying, at least at first. Initial reports hinted at hidden chambers behind the walls, suggesting there could be unopened rooms, maybe even the lost burial chamber of Nefertiti. For a moment, the world held its breath. Could we finally be on the verge of solving her mystery? But as more scans were carried out, the evidence became less clear. Some teams insisted there were anomalies that pointed to hidden spaces. Others dismissed the findings, saying the walls showed no sign of additional chambers at all. To this day, the debate rages on. Was that just wishful thinking? Or is Egypt still guarding the Queen's final secret, buried just inches away from where millions of tourists pass every year? And then there's the bigger question of why Nefertiti vanished from history in the first place. Scholars have argued for decades about what really happened. One camp believes her erasure was deliberate. When Akhenaten died, Egypt was in chaos. The people, the priests, the entire establishment wanted to abandon Aten, the sun god, and return to the traditional pantheon led by Amen. If Nefertiti was the face of Atenism, then removing her from memory would have been essential. It wouldn't just be about ignoring her. It would be about wiping her out completely, rewriting history to pretend she had never existed. But there's another camp that sees things differently. They argue Nefertiti's disappearance wasn't about weakness or disgrace at all. Instead, they see it as evidence of something astonishing, that she may have risen even higher, taking the throne herself as pharaoh. If that's true, then she didn't vanish, she evolved. And the records we're missing are not mistakes, but deliberate attempts to disguise her rule, especially once later kings like Horemheb restored the old gods and wanted to bury the memory of the Amarna revolution for good. And so, we're left with questions: a beautiful bust with no story, a boy king's tomb that may hide more than it reveals. Scholars divided between erasure, disgrace, or secret power. What's so striking about all of this is how much of Nefertiti's legacy survives in fragments, in whispers and half clues. It's almost as if history left us a puzzle, but scattered the pieces across time, daring us to put them back together. And maybe that's why her story continues to haunt us. Because in the end, Nefertiti isn't just a queen who vanished, she's a mystery that refuses to die. So, after all the theories, all the fragments, and all the unanswered questions, what do we really take away from the story of Nefertiti? First, her legacy endures. More than 3,000 years after she lived, she is still one of the most recognizable figures from ancient Egypt. Say the name Nefertiti, and most people instantly picture her iconic bust, serene, elegant, timeless. Her very name translates to the beautiful one has come. And yet, isn't it ironic? While her beauty has become eternal, the story of her end remains a blank page in history. But maybe that's what makes her so unforgettable. She is not just remembered for what we know about her, but for what we don't know. That silence, that absence, almost acts like an invitation. It challenges us to imagine, to search, to keep asking questions. From a historical perspective, her disappearance says something profound about the fragility of power and memory. Think about it. Here was a woman at the height of influence, standing beside a pharaoh, possibly even ruling Egypt herself. She shaped religion, politics, and culture. And yet, within a generation, her name was erased, her legacy nearly buried beneath layers of stone and sand. History reminds us over and over that power can be dazzling, but it can also be fragile. Great empires fall. Names that once commanded nations can vanish in a single chisel stroke. Nefertiti's story is a powerful reminder of how quickly memory can fade and how easily it can be rewritten. And yet, she resists erasure. Why? Because the mystery keeps her alive. The search for her tomb, the endless debates about her fate, the radar scans in the Valley of the Kings, these aren't just academic exercises. They're proof that the world still cares, that we're still captivated by her presence. Every new theory, every new excavation keeps her spirit alive in both scholarship and popular imagination. And here's the final thought. I want to leave you with whether Nefertiti died quietly of illness, whether she was pushed aside in palace intrigue, or whether she rose higher and ruled in disguise as pharaoh. Her story refuses to be forgotten. In a way, that may be the greatest twist of all. The attempt to erase her only made her more powerful. The silence surrounding her and only deepened the fascination. And today she stands not just as a queen of ancient Egypt, but as a symbol of resilience, mystery, and the enduring power of human curiosity. Because here's the truth: Nefertiti never really disappeared, not from history, not from art, and certainly not from our imagination. As long as we keep searching, asking, and telling her story, she will always live on.